The first variation has a few specific challenges. The first one is that the accents are on the top note, and therefore the bow has to go basically slow and fast and arrive on the beat. And that can be tricky to time well with the bow and the left hand. So one way, of course, is to practice it slowly, making sure that the little notes are before the beat and that the accent is clear. Two other challenges in this variation are the bow distribution. Make sure to use enough bow on the accent so that you have room to travel on the way back on the up bow. And of course that stroke itself, this off the string staccato stroke. One way to practice it is to go in one spot and come back to the same spot in the bow so that you catch the string with your fingers each time in a collé stroke and come back. And that gives you the right feeling. So for instance, on one note it would go like this. And you can practice it that way in context as well. And of course there will be some traveling in context, but the ability to come back to the same spot is helpful to get the right motion on the right catch. Variation 2 is relatively straightforward. A couple of things to keep in mind. Keep the half steps really close to create as much dissonance as possible. It's more effective that way. And also just don't be afraid of having nearly a double stop feeling on the string crossing so that the dissonance is brought out. Variation 3 is tricky. It's easy to focus too much on the intonation of the octave and forget to tune the actual melody, so it's worth it to practice it with just playing the bottom note and making sure that the melody itself is the way you like to hear it. It's also worth it to check the fourth finger melody, so you might want to do it once or twice with just the top line as well. And when doing the top melody, make sure that the fourth finger keeps a good shape, a consistent shape throughout, so it doesn't collapse in any direction. Variation 4 is all about intonation and specifically about replacing fingers. For any hand, however small the fingers, you will have to replace them. And this has to be done effortlessly without pressing too hard. So work it very slowly, finding the easiest, smoothest way to exchange. And of course, listen very carefully to the intonation as you do it. It's very hard to play an even chromatic scale, especially that high. And the following variation I found the trickiest part about it is to get the right sound on the bass and the top, and you will find that you'll have to play a lot deeper on the bottom notes and then quite light on the return, so you can travel enough on the 16th notes to get back to the right part of a bow and have enough bow for the bottom. Generally think of the bass being strong on the top notes being lighter. I find this next variation in double stops particularly difficult. A couple of thoughts about the thirds. First of all, don't tune them the same way as if you were playing them slowly. So don't look for a perfectly harmonic intonation, but a slightly more melodic intonation with smaller half steps melodically. In other words, you should have slightly wider major thirds and slightly narrower minor thirds. Also, I find that it's easier to play the thirds by keeping the bow quite deeply in the string. With the shifts, we have a tendency to want to release, which is often a good thing, but in this case, you want to keep your bow deeply in the string the whole time, or else the thirds don't speak well and the balance between the notes changes. In the thirds, I find it helpful to also focus on the fourth finger motion, which is the trickiest. And of course, you should practice it in rhythms to make sure that you have a lot of energy in your fingers the whole time and a lot of very good synchronization. While it's often a good thing to start slowly and increase speed when you practice, it can be helpful to practice the tenths at tempo, but just adding 1/10 at a time so that you get the right feel for the hand. So in other words, you play one note, then two notes, and three notes. Be aware of your thumb position in the tenth. A common mistake is to start with a thumb that's too low, too much in first position, because it's easier if you don't have to move it much through the passage. So in other words, you might want to start the second group with your thumb already near the rib of the instrument.